and fifthly, importantly, external support. Importantly, in the wider operating environment, a number of aspects around policy and budget allocations and so on, monitoring systems, supply chain support, the things that cannot take place at the local level and have to be escalated up through the institutional system. And we mustn't forget that there are externalities. There are factors which can undermine, threaten and undermine even the best system. The shocks, the externalities which represent the risks and the threats. There is a myth around community management. Yesterday in Clarissa's keynote, she was a little bit outspoken in saying or implying community management is dead. To an extent, I would agree with that in the sense that a traditional model of community management in which we undertake an external intervention, we build a system, we organise the community, set up a water user committee, assume that they can manage the assets, and then we walk away. I think that model is dead. It's clear that improving or raising the level of service and providing technology actually increases dependence on a whole range of things, spare parts, technical skills, support mechanisms. So I would like to see us move from that model to this one, in which we recognise that community structures do have ability, but a limited ability, to maintain the assets, but support is needed from outside, both in relation to technical support, but also in relation to software. And this is what Eric Bauman meant by community management plus, the plus being the external support, some of which has to be responsive, some of which has to be strategic. In our sustainability framework, we try to set this out in more detail. I won't go through every box on this diagram, but really to take you through the top line. We need real demand for service. We need high quality design and implementation, both hardware and software, in order to achieve the best possible community management or local management arrangements. But that's not enough. We need external support, some of which will have to take place at national level, some at more local level, but all relating to functions which communities or local management cannot fulfill themselves. There's been a lot of talk over the years about harmonization and alignment, basically about singing the same song to the same tune, about all players working to the same agenda. All of us need to be committed to sustainability with no exceptions, and taking an integrated approach, integrated across the conference themes and others, and a systematic approach which plans in sustainability from the outset. And I think there are four things in particular that are needed here. Firstly, a commitment by all players, whether they're multilateral donors and banks, or whether they're small NGOs or everyone in between, to work with and through the permanent national institutions. Secondly, we need to be committed to the monitoring of sustainability. James, I think, has once or twice referred to the importance of monitoring for management. You can't manage what you don't measure. We need to be doing research. We need to be a learning sector. And we need to go beyond that and take our learning back into action. So just to go through those one by one. Working with government. There are a number of reasons why not working with government and national institutions creates problems. Unless we have the full cooperation of national institutions, then it undermines the achievements that we're all trying to make. Local government is the usual permanent institution on the ground. There may be others, but certainly NGOs are not permanent on the ground. We all need to be working according to common policies and procedures and standards and guidelines and reporting systems. That's got to be the goal, even in countries where government is very weak, policies are very weak. This needs to be where we're heading. In terms of monitoring, the example here on the slide is of water point monitoring, water point mapping, where data from the field, in this particular case, is showing functional and non-functional water points. Seeing is believing. These sort of approaches can be very powerful in exposing where the problems lie and giving the possibility for rapid action. We've now just committed ourselves in WaterAid to monitoring interventions which we made 1 year ago, 3 years ago, 5 years ago, and 10 years ago, and doing that annually. The data will start to flow soon. It hasn't yet. Our institution is 30 years old, and we're just beginning this. I would urge that on all organisations in this sector. In relation to research, I think we need to know what's going on at the project and the programme level in terms of the more qualitative factors around water point functionality, reliability, and so on. And also all the other factors in that rather more complicated diagram that I put up a moment ago. At the national level, we need to have a good picture of functionality, and if we don't have functionality data, we need to be asking why not, and putting data collection mechanisms in place. But also looking at whether the sector policies and sector capacity is there to provide the support that local management needs. And I like to think in terms of a chain of learning in which raw data is turned into information through some form of analysis, simple analysis, which then does get into people's brains, into their thinking, and then out into action. And that's where we have to be heading. There was a Greek god called Janus who looked forward and backward. And it does seem to me that sustainability is about not just looking back and looking at the present and present functionality of services, but looking to the future as well. Sustainability is not the same as functionality. Functionality is simply a snapshot now. Sustainability is about looking forward and assessing the threats and the risks to the management arrangements, the financing arrangements, and so on. An example of how this might be done, we have a very good example in the form of water safety plans, which is a risk-based procedure to ensure or assure water quality for health. So it's got quite a narrow remit, but it's a very carefully structured and easy to operate approach. A number of organisations now, including ours, and we're working together with Oxfam particularly on this, are trying to take the best principles of water safety planning and apply it to community-based water resource management to assure water security, both in quality and quantity. So going beyond quality and going beyond health. And maybe it's possible to think further about WASH sustainability planning, where we take a risk-based approach and ask what are the threats to the permanence of services and the permanence of behaviour changes. One way that this might be done is illustrated here in some work we were doing in Madagascar. Just using 6 dimensions of demand, the condition of the assets, the state of the water resources, the community management arrangements, the external support, and the financial arrangements. And a simple scoring system to compare the assessment at the point of construction or design, and sometime later. And in this particular example, demand seems to be as high as it ever was, but there are some worries about water resources and about the reduction of spring flows in this particular gravity system. I think it's really important that sustainability does not become just one of the fads or fashions in development that we so often see. It's got to become normative practice, just as the hygiene behaviours that Val's been talking about have to become habitual. The sustainability needs to become habitual for the institutions and for everybody involved in the sector. So it's a mindset among individuals, individual professionals. It's a mindset in terms of organisational culture and getting sustainability into normative practice through the standards and systems and procedures that all of our organisations adopt or develop and adopt. Going forward and relating to community management, it does seem to me that community management has served us well for a number of decades now. But what we've seen, particularly in the last 8 to 10 years, has been that the limits of community management are becoming evident. Community management in many cases does need external support. It may need cost sharing by government in order to perform sustainably. And so the community management plus model, I think, is viable for the foreseeable future, but there is a future beyond that. Demographics are changing very quickly. Urbanisation and the demographics of rural communities are changing in a big way. And some of the things that various speakers have been talking about in terms of the user as a manager of their water supply system or sanitation or whatever it may be, to the user as a customer are surely going to follow in the course of time. So just to try and draw things to a conclusion, despite what I said about don't subdivide the conference, I think all 4 threads were essential. Arguably, there could have been other threads too. But I'm absolutely adamant that there is no such thing as technical sustainability or financial sustainability or institutional sustainability. There is one sustainability, and it's the weaving together of all those different aspects. For the user of a service, it doesn't matter why it broke down. It broke down. And that must not happen. Improving access and bringing about behaviour change in the short term, hard though both of those are, they were the easy bit of the challenge. Keeping services working while continuing to do that work and keeping practices, hygiene practices working, that's the challenge for a world which I think for most of us now is becoming post-MDG, even though we're still only in 2011. And the question is, do we have the appetite for that and the energy to put in, to change our practices, to change our thinking, to put sustainability absolutely in the mainstream, and to accept nothing less than permanence. I've referred to the sustainability framework. There are copies around. It's on the web in 3 languages. All I ask is that you will continue to be obsessed with sustainability. It is not a bias. It is absolutely essential. Thank you very much for your attention.